All right, let's continue with chapter 3. So Harry had just gotten a letter, but Uncle Vernon took it away. Harry didn't move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it," demanded Dudley. "Out," roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scruffs of their necks and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen to the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, his glasses dangling from one ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen at the crack between the door and the floor. "Vernon," Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, "look at the address. How could they have possibly known where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house, do you?" "Watching, spying, might be following us," muttered Uncle Vernon wildly. "But what should we do, Vernon? Do we write back? Tell them we don't want..." Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. "No," he finally said. "No, we will ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yes, that is best. We won't do anything. But I'm not having one in the house, Petunia. Didn't we swear when we took him in we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" That evening, when he got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he'd never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. "Where's my letter?" said Harry, the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. "Who is writing me?" "No one. It was addressed to you by mistake," said Uncle Vernon shortly. "I have burned it." "It was not a mistake," said Harry angrily. "It had my cupboard on it." "Silence," yelled Uncle Vernon, as a couple spiders fell from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and then forced his face into a smile, which looked painful. Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking, well, you really are getting a bit big for it. We think it might be nice if you moved to Dudley's second bedroom." "Why?" said Harry. "Don't ask questions," snapped his uncle. "Take your stuff upstairs now." The Dursleys' house had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, and one where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all his toys and things that wouldn't fit in his first bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to this room. He sat down on the bed and stared around him. Nearly everything in here was broken. The month-old cinema camera was lying on top of a small working tank Dudley had once driven over the next door's dog, and in the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, which he put his foot through when his favorite program had been canceled. There was a large bird cage which once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for a real air rifle, which was up on the shelf with all the other bent toys because Dudley had sat on it. Other shelves were full of books. These were the only things in the room that looked as though they'd never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bawling at his mother. "I don't want him in there. I need that room. Make him get out." Harry sighed and stretched out on the bed. Yesterday he'd given anything to be up here, but today he'd rather be back in his cupboard with the letter rather than here without it. The next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was still in shock. He'd screamed, whacked his father with his smelting stick, and even been sick on purpose, kicked his mother and thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about this time yesterday and was bitterly wishing he'd opened the letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. I'll show you guys the picture right here. When the post arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging his things with his smelting stick all the way down the hall. Then he shouted, "There's another one! Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive." With a strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leapt from his seat and ran down the hall, Harry right beside him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him, which was made very difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind. After a minute of confused fighting, in which everyone got hit a lot by a smelting stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasped for breath, and with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. Go to your cupboard. I mean your bedroom, he wheezed at Harry. Dudley, just go. Harry walked around and around his new room. Someone knew he had moved out of his cupboard, and they seemed to know he hadn't received his letter. Surely that meant they'd try again. And this time he'd make sure they didn't fail. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive and get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hallway towards the front door. Arrgh! Harry leapt into the air. He'd trodden on something big and squishy on the doormat, something alive. Lights clicked on upstairs, and to Harry's horror, he realized that the big squashy something had been his uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure Harry didn't do exactly what he had been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for half an hour and then told him to go and make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably into the kitchen. By the time he got back, the post had arrived right into Uncle Vernon's lap. Harry could see the 3 letters addressed in green ink. I want, he began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into little pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go into work that day. He stayed home and nailed up the letterbox. See, he explained to Aunt Petunia, if they can't deliver them, they'll just give up. I'm not sure that'll work, Vernon. Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They're not like you and me, said Vernon, trying to knock a nail with a piece of fruit cake Aunt Petunia had just brought them. All right, we will stop here and then continue for part 3.